Ready to go?
Yep.
I'm recording on this. Very good. Okay, I now call to order the March 13th, 2025 meeting of the Hurley Zoning Board of Appeals. Do I have a motion to open the meeting? Motion made by Board Member Alex Myra. We're going to throw a second at you, Kara, seconded by Kara Snyder. All members in favor, verbal aye or show of hands. Aye or vote. All present members of the board in favor, none opposed. Let the record show that board member Stephanie Whitten is not present with us or absent, but all other board members are here. At this time, I will query the members of the public present.
Pledge of allegiance.
Oh, pledges. Why don't I?
I don't know.
Please praise and join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may- So at the beginning of our meetings, we have a public comment period where any members of the public that are present are welcome to address the board about anything that is on our agenda this evening. So if you are a member of the public that is present and want to speak on something that's on our agenda, now would be the time to do it. I believe I'm seeing only applicants present and members of the town body. So I'll call a second time for any public comment. And the third time, there being no members of the public present to speak at the public comment section, I motion to open and close the public hearing at the same time. Seconded by board member Kara Snyder. Any discussion amongst the board about that motion? None. All in favor of opening and closing the public hearing comment section of the meeting, verbal aye or show of hands. All board members present are in favor, none opposed. What do we got? 7:04? Perfect. Scheduled for 7:05 here to purchase first. So we'll take 1 minute and then we're going to discuss your application.
We'll see what that agrees. Yeah, so technically, it's not
It's
here.
not a public hearing, we could just start.
Yeah, and discuss, the public hearing is closed, but, you guys do have the option of either asking the applicant questions or discussing or seeing if the applicant has anything else to add. But no additional public comments.
Okay. Well, moving into our first item of old business / decisional, we will be addressing the Green/Perfect solar array appeal from their letter of denial or denial of certificate of appropriateness. I'm sure every board member is very well versed in this field, as we have had it before us for a couple of months now.
The hearing open for 2 months.
Correct. Received much feedback on it. I think we've covered everything that we need to address. I'd like,
No letter.
so there was one letter that came in after we closed the public hearing, and I didn't bother even addressing it or putting it on, because it was after we obviously closed the public hearing on the matter. There's a written submission, days after the fact. A lot of, I know that, at our last meeting, we had a lot of emails coming in and letters that were kind of like last minute, which I believe were all added to the drive for everybody's review. A lot of it was reiteration, of the same talking points and facts that we've heard. for or against. So there was only one, but I did not accept it being that public hearing is closed. So at this point, I guess, we'll start with, do any board members have any further questions for the applicant, who was appealing at this time? Kay's done an extremely good job of presenting all of her facts, figures, points for appealing. Let's begin a conversation on this matter. Before we start, I will state that technically do have 62 days to make our decision, which does fall in our next meeting. However, being that we've, in my opinion, thoroughly gone through this application, and had a lot of, input from all parties involved, I would hope that everybody can have a decision. So I guess I'll start with, is it possible to get the criteria for section 109 of the code,
1095?
1095, yeah. That might be hard for you to bring up because that would be in the email.
It actually has, 109,
Preservation.
yeah, 109 is the section regarding appeals, for hardship purposes.
Yeah, which is essentially the criteria that we
Would
will
be
have to be considering this evening, for any of our decision-making purposes. Do you have it there? Just in paper
Yes.
format?
Can I ask a question?
So,
I did some research on regulatory taking in the Fifth Amendment. Can I say that to the board before you guys make your decision?
yeah, at this point, we're going to be discussing basically the criteria, but, I don't see any harm in allowing you to
I don't know what those
address this one more time. Yeah.
Okay.
Was this something you had sent to us
No,
prior?
no, it's kind of,
Okay. Board members, are you interested in hearing? It is the applicant, so it's
Yeah.
a public submission. By all means.
should I go? Okay, so the last clause of the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution says the government cannot take private property for public use without just compensation. Now, usually when we talk about this, we're talking about a town taking for that land. But the law also acknowledges regulatory taking. This is when the government restricts the use of private property for public use. That is what is happening here. I want to use the roof that we paid for to generate electricity to pay my electricity bill, which is allowed under the town code. The Historic Preservation Commission would like me to keep the roof clear for tourism or civic pride or something that makes Hurley memorable. According to law, even if a public taking for private property is legitimate, it still requires compensation. In this case, we are talking about not only our loss in home value due to the restriction, but also the loss of the value of electricity the roof could produce over the life of the panels. Last month, we talked about how a low estimate is $300 a month over 30 years, which is $180,000. This is a very definable, measurable loss. If the Historic Preservation Code said that solar panels were not allowed, I'd be out of luck. But the code does not say that. Utilities are not mentioned at all. So either this is an overstep on the part of the Historic Preservation Commission, and certificates of appropriateness do not require, utilities do not require certificates of appropriateness, or the section of the Preservation Code that says contemporary design for alterations and additions shall not be discouraged when such alterations and additions do not destroy significant historical, architectural, cultural material must apply here because utility upgrades are necessary for all neighborhoods, including historical ones. In fact, the only other was that a homeowner wanted to put solar on the house. It was approved by the town. They got a building permit. That was my house and people that owned it before me. And those solar panels were on it when I bought the house. So this was a contemporaneous decision. It was not made before I bought the house. It is a decision that was made in March 2024. It does not predate our application for building. The hardship section of the Historic Preservation Code exist to prevent homeowners from experiencing hardship with public taking of private property, and also to protect the town from the liability for having to compensate homeowners because of overzealous and short-sighted decisions by the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Board, who did not take into consideration the legal ramifications or the financial hardship their decisions can cause. And I will hope that you can prevent that. Thank you. That is, I am so done. There's nothing else I can say unless you ask a question. I have made all the arguments I could possibly make.
Well, we did have a question for you regarding the previous solar panels. And there, where was the placement of those previous to
They
them being?
were on the, so there's the roof that we're talking about and the roof behind it. They were on the roof behind it, but instead of being flat, they were raised. So you could see them from the front street if you knew what you were looking for.
All right.
But
And
they
you-
weren't on the roof that you're.
No, they were not on the roof that we're talking about. It is a different roof.
You did have approval to place solar panels on that section,
Yes.
that same section.
I did.
So that's kind of like, you point that they were, you got approval to
Well,
put them in
what I'm-
that same exact area.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the decision was a new decision. The decisions in the past had approved solar. So this was a contemporary decision. The law does not say I can't put solar on the roof. It's very ambiguous. It doesn't say anything about utilities at all. So buying a house with solar and I'm honestly, I'm just flabbergasted. In 2025, the idea that anybody would prevent putting solar panels on a house, any house, it just. I think it's crazy.
Forced to buy electricity from the Canadians, aren't they?
Mhm. So, yeah. But that is why I didn't bring up the solar panels originally. I only occurred to me later when they were talking about how no one had ever put solar in Hurley before in the planning board meeting that wasn't true. So, yeah.
I think the point really, it's about solar, but it's also about the fact that you bought a home on Main Street in Hurley, knowing that there were going to be things you couldn't do to the outside.
But I did read the historic preservation code and it does say that contemporary alterations are allowed. When they fit certain criteria. And as I said in my application, I think the solar panels meet that criteria. They're small in size. They fit in with the larger neighborhood. And in this instance, the neighborhood is only 5 houses away. 5 houses away from my house has solar on it. Across the street on Depot Street, there's 2 solar arrays. That is 200 yards from my house. So
She also built the house in a much different economic paradigm than it currently. The cost of living is probably like half of what it is now, even though it was 5-6 years ago. There's unforeseen stuff. The argument that you shouldn't buy it if you can't afford it is like, it's pretty.
That's not what I said.
So let's just, to clarify
yeah.
and to make sure that we get the scope. So basically, the appeal is not for them to consider whether it's appropriate. It's not a appeal on those grounds going through the criteria of whether it was or is appropriate. The appeal is based on specific criteria on hardship grounds. So if you at any point, once you've gone through all the procedures, if you want to appeal as to whether it's appropriate or not to have them at that location, that's something that through an Article 78 proceeding can be brought. But what's before them is whether to grant it on the grounds of hardship. So that's what they're empowered to do under Chapter 109, the Historic Preservation Law, is to look at hardship criteria and to grant it on that basis. Okay, so there is the written criteria there. And then the other thing just to make sure that everyone's clear, and I think that you can clarify it for them if I'm stating anything incorrectly. Based on what you said, what other speakers said pertaining to the certificate of appropriateness, it's not for the installation of solar panels, but for the installation of those solar panels at a specific location on the roof.
correct.
Okay.
Without those solar panels, I wouldn't have enough energy for the system to work.
So And you definitely have laid out, your arguments for the hardship in the documents that you've submitted. So I guess they can ask you questions as to any additional information they need pertaining to, that location, why that location is, not having it at that location creates a hardship and so forth. But really, that's what the focus of the board is the decision to not allow solar panels at that location and how that decision potentially creates a hardship under the hardship criteria. All right.
So that, unless there's any further questions for the applicant, I just want to read the criteria for the hardship application. We can have a discussion on any given item within that, but I'd like just to read them down so everybody has it fresh in their head, essentially. I'm just going to start with moving past the 109.13 into item number C1, which is the criteria. 1, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible. 2, the alleged hardship relating to the property is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. 3, the request, if approved, it still conform with the designation of landmarks as described in 109-5 of this chapter. And we can go and read that after I'm done with the criteria. 4, the alleged hardship has not been self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the relief. 5, in the case of a demolition or removal permit, the applicant shall, in addition to subsection C1, this doesn't have anything to do with us. So I guess,
So it's the 4 criteria.
so 109
Yeah, do you want me to?
you want to, yeah, the request if approved would still perform the designation of landmarks and
Do
describe.
you want to go through, we'll go through that when we go through each criteria. So start with criteria number 1 and 2, then we go through that.
We'll approach it. So starting with 1, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether or not that return represents the most profitable return possible. In my own opinion, I know that say that space is the easiest for you because you don't want to cut down the tree, the walnut tree that's back there, right? You were offered panels on the
No,
garage side of the roof.
the thing is, when the historic preservation came in, they came in and they just pointed to roofs and said, you could put it here, you could put it here, you could put it here. They said I could put it on the garage, but reasonably, it would cost about $12,000 to cut down most of the trees in the way of the garage. And so that is not affordable. I can't pay for that. Also, I believe that cutting down those trees would be way more transfigurative of the streets than the panels because they're 150-year-old. If you walk down the street, you can see them very clearly. All of those trees would have to go per the solar company and the tree people. I sent you the estimate of what that would cost. Yeah. So the other choices, I've gotten 2 other second opinions. I got 2 opinions originally. I picked one and put in the building permit. Since then, I got another opinion that Mike Baum's company used, the solar company that put his panels on his house, and they could not do anything different. They said that cutting down trees would not give me more sun cover or sun in the back, and that their recommendation would to do the same thing or put ground mounted solar in the side yard. Also, the Historic Preservation Commission had suggested I put solar on poles. I don't know if you know what that is, but I figured out what that is. It's when you put individual panels on individual poles and they would still have to go on the side yard. So those were the suggestions they gave me, except Jim Decker told me that I should construct another angled roof behind the roof so I could put another roof with panels on, which does not make sense logistically. Like, he wanted me to build a second roof behind the roof. So that is also cost prohibitive and not allowed. My suggestion that they did not listen to was I got an estimate for Leland cypress, 25 of them, lining the side yard. At 5 to 6 feet tall, those things cost $3,750 plus a 1,000 installation fee, and they grow 3 feet a year. They would immediately obscure the panels from the street, and over time would grow up to partially obscure them from the buildings. That is something I reasonably pay for, at least figure out how to pay for that. That would be my suggestion. But again, planting trees along the side of the street also, I think, is, I don't know, more disruptive than just putting black solar panels on the dark roof.
Well, regarding number one, the board, I'll read it again. The applicant cannot realize reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible. To me, the secondary part of that sentence relates to basically that it's not, you know, what the most profitable portion of it is. It's that you can't get what you're asking for without having to spend some amount of money to bypass.
I didn't think about it that way, but the cost of what I would need to do would negate the profits. Yeah, I had been thinking about it more in terms of home value.
Profit's a strange word to use for it because it's obviously an implement on a home. It's not a business that generates money. Thinking of that word, using the word benefit is kind of, you know, maybe a better way, an easier way to think about that. I think, to me, it's pretty clear that any other attempted action that she takes other than, you know, putting them on this roof where they've been designated by the professionals to be most efficient, all the other options are sort of comical, clownish, and like, you know, in terms of cutting down 150-year-old trees, like actually disgusting. I don't see it as there being any other option that's not frankly ridiculous and more intrusive than the panels that will sit on top of the roof. And maybe if the, you know, community got it together, a local billionaire wanted to put in a solar farm to give people solar energy, she can take it right off without any damage to the house. Frankly, the fact that we've had this many meetings is like not profitable. Anybody has someone who lost hundreds of dollars in earnings by being here.
So in terms of the way the question's worded, the solar installation company is the professionals, right? They're telling somebody that they would not be efficient in another place. The way that question is worded, that's like saying, well, if we went back to the solar company and said, no, we really want to give you $12,000 to put them on the least efficient roof, they probably would. But is that,
They turn off.
they won't even, right?
Generally, when you deal with this type of hardship standard, it has to do with the use of a property and a proposed use, whereas other uses are not profitable. So for the purposes of this, it seems the alleged hardship pertains to excessive energy costs. So looking at it under those terms seems the most appropriate way to evaluate it. And, you know, discussing it in that sense, you know, obviously the location here matters, but it also does not necessarily preclude other ways of mitigating energy costs or other things. These are all things that you guys should be discussing and considering when evaluating the alleged hardship of excessive energy costs.
Do we need to guess about what a chart of electricity costs? That looks like from the time she bought the house to now, especially including the fact that it's a Canadian company and we're maniac driven tariffs going on right now.
Well, I would just say that, so again, going back to this criteria specifically, you know, this is what the applicant has to prove to show a hardship under the law. So,
Is it all four?
what was that?
Is it all four?
Well, the last one definitely is relevant, but doesn't necessarily fit. So it's one of these things, and also even the third one basically is just something that is a consideration that if approved, would it still conform? But we will get to those.
But
So
the
right
applicant
now,
has to be.
well, as it says under the statute, the wording is that in order to prove, the applicant shall demonstrate to the board that 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's how it's worded. So right now we're looking at if they cannot realize a reasonable return, regardless. So, you know, discussing energy costs is definitely relevant, and discussing, you know, the inability to be able to afford energy costs as well as alternatives that are potentially available. Have you discussed anything about grants? Because I know in other townships, there's a lot of historic.
I'm not eligible for it. I confirmed with, the National Park Service too, when, not the National Park, I'm sorry, the New York State Historical Places. They rechecked the zip code and the median income of Hurley is too high to qualify as for the grants. So that's still a no-go.
Your electric heat pump, is that what I remember from the
I have-
last meeting?
Yeah, I have two. My
Two
dad,
electric heat pumps?
no, two systems. My side of the house is propane. And it is a boiler and radiators. And then my father's side of the house is heat pump. We put that in, because we thought it would be the most cost effective.
Do you have any wood stoves or?
We have two fireplaces in our house, which we use to try not to turn on our heat. They're on my side of the house, not on the heat pump side, so that won't mitigate the heat pump cost. I have caught my father with his heat off covered in a blanket, which I don't think is a good solution, because he's worried about the cost. But the fireplaces, we use them, we can only use them when we're home, and they aren't, they are not, what are those called where they seal the heat, the good.
Like an insert?
Yeah, they're not inserts, they're real fireplaces. So a lot of heat goes up the chimney, but we did use them to prevent us from turning on the propane side of the house to save some money, until whenever we can, basically. I think one of the things we really need to do are fix the windows on the old side of the house, but I can't afford to do that currently, because I can't really get ahead of the bills right now. I think that would make a big difference on keeping the heat inside the house on the old side of the house. But right now we just have the windows plastic.
Shall we move on to criteria number 2 for discussion? 2, the alleged hardship relating to the property is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. This is my opinion, where you could make an argument one way or the other. A substantial portion of the district or neighborhood, obviously, if we're talking about the historic district, this wouldn't necessarily apply to all properties. However, if you talk about a neighborhood, when you go around the corner, you can see clearly that it's not consideration for some other properties. So I would.
Can I respectfully disagree on that first chart? Because they are allowing panels that can't be seen.
Just
Oh,
quick,
I should have-
they should be,
Oh, I'm sorry.
because they're deliberating, but if they ask you questions or
I'm
then
sorry.
I think you brought it up at the last, the
Yeah.
argument of,
There's a lot of places you can put solar that you can't see. It's only a few houses that are restricted. And if you walk down Main Street and take the corner, you can see, like, all of my neighbors on my side have these really wide backyards that they can put ground mounted solar and then on the other side, all of the roofs, they face the opposite direction, south, which is the south and east that are the good sides, north and west produce less energy. And well, yeah, and then on the Hurley Avenue side, south faces back, and then you have the drop off behind the houses on the other side where you can put ground mounted solar without being seen. And if you walk along the rail trail, you see all of that space back there, it wouldn't be seen from the street.
certainly. Well, in regards to this question, perhaps the attorney can clarify. When it goes into say substantial portion of the district or neighborhood, being that this is essentially regarding the historic district. Context of what we should be looking at.
that would be the most appropriate for looking at, because especially considering that the restrictions are a result of it being in this district, that it should be looked in the context of the restrictions in this district. But again, the alleged hardship pertains to energy costs. So you guys can look at that with regard to a greater neighborhood or district. It's definitely something that when it comes to a hardship being unique, as you guys have dealt with use variances and the like, the property is set apart from other properties, with a different type of difficulty than what other properties face.
So it's really about.
So let's dive into that a little bit about district versus.
The substantial part is tough. Substantial word is a little difficult. And one could make the argument to the point of the conversation that utility costs are high for everybody. So that would then eliminate that question. But when you say substantial, energy costs are being uniquely driven up in that particular house due to its historical significance. It doesn't have the same building codes or standards or windows that a house 100 yards does that allows it to be more efficient. So as soon as you get into substantial, there is no substantial part of Hurley where houses are limited in their ability to be efficient with the latest energy improvements due to their historical nature.
I would agree with you. So.
It's unique enough.
Meek is another word in there. Any other discussion on that, thoughts? Anyone would like to address? Let's read number 3. The request, if approved, would still conform with the designation of landmarks as described in 109-5 of this chapter. You have that 109-5.
I do have 109-5. So under 109-5, basically a group of properties may be designated as a historic district if it contains properties which meet one or more of the criteria for designation of an individual landmark, and by reason of such qualities constitutes a cohesive area of the town. For a property to be designated as an individual landmark, it must meet the following criteria. 1, it possesses special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value as a part of a archaeological, cultural, political, economic, or social history of a locality, region, state, or nation. And or 2, it is identified with historic personages. And or 3, embodies the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style. And or 4, is the work of a designer whose work has significantly influenced an age. And or because of a unique location or singular physical characteristic represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. And or is listed on the state and or national registers of historic places, or which is subject to a pending application for listing.
Okay, so having those criteria met, let me read that question again. The request, if approved, would still conform with the designation of landmarks as described in 109-5 of this chapter. Theoretically could check that off because it's
Yes.
still a stone house sitting there.
It doesn't touch its designation.
Interesting.
It wouldn't affect it if it were applying for a designation. It wouldn't affect that.
Further comment from the board regarding number 3. Pro or con?
As worded,
As
it doesn't
worded.
change, it doesn't change its designation.
We'll move on to 4, which has those words that I don't like. Which consideration shall be relevant. Oh, the alleged hardship has not been self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the zoning board of appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the relief. This is where there's the hangup of, is the alleged difficulty self-created of installing heat pumps, driving your energy bills up? But consideration shall be relevant to the decision, but it doesn't have to necessarily sway anybody's decision on the matter. Thoughts on that, the board?
And you should be set aside,
What do you mean, subside?
not consider it.
What's part of the,
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, I'll consider it, but not use it. You don't have to use it. You just have to consider it.
Well,
Yeah,
She would
consider
have
it,
to-
but it will not prohibit a decision either way, that it should be a consideration.
I think it's pretty clear that the hardship, has been self-created.
I think,
I mean,
well, let's determine if that's relevant first. If it doesn't really have. an
Well, we're
effect
like
on
Karen
that.
explained herself. She's-
Well, it's-
everybody's entitled to their-
look, I mean,
no, please, this is a heartbreaking situation
yeah, really.
and a terrible decision.
It's just, it seems to me that it's self-created because, and I'm not criticizing your decision for buying electric heat pumps because, you know, I mean, but you did buy an electric heat pump. And we all know, you know, electricity is very expensive for everybody right now. But you did buy an electric heat pump.
Are you suggesting that electric is better than oil?
No, I'm not suggesting
And
anything.
that question isn't before the board, basically, and again, the board goes
No,
there.
no,
But the question really, this is a very narrow situation. This isn't whether it's appropriate or not to have. That's what the certificate of appropriateness. This is whether there's a hardship and there's a specific legal terminology.
I would, yeah.
And I definitely understand both of your perspectives. I can tell you, every time I received a $300 electric bill, I'm not happy every month.
But that's the thing is,
The point of
mine
view
is
like for me,
550 and
Well, I
his
have
is,
oil too.
but he's got a
That's the
600 square foot apartment. That's what is crazy about this, is that the electricity portion of my bill is $550 this month. It's my dad,
Yeah.
I don't understand why this is
So
happening.
would like to make-
let's talk about the self-creation process from 2019 to now, where, what do you start with? You start with dismantling the pandemic response team. We have a pandemic, we give billions and billions of dollars out to everyone in America to try to float through a pandemic. People spend that money. Inflation goes up, electricity bills are tied to inflation. In 2022, electricity costs went up 10%. They went up 6% the year after. In general, they're tied to inflation, which, does anybody here feel good about tying anything to inflation right now? It's the same amount of self-creation as if we had attacked, you know, if there'd been a war in the Middle East and oil prices had gone up. You don't know these things are gonna happen. There's no way to, if any of us could have, if Katie Greaves knew electricity prices were going to take the upward course that they took that since that time, she could have bought investment, whatever, what do they call it?
Products.
Investment products, basically. Okay, go with better, with the more trashy term, I forget what it is. But, she could have hedged her money and had a investment portfolio that worked for her and was immune to the effects of inflation and kept her in a secure place. But nobody's psychic. Like, she could have been totally wrong. She could have bet on oil and been totally wrong. She bet on electricity. She was wrong. She didn't self-create that. Terrible economic policy. Idiots running the fucking show. That created that.
Language.
And the point with heat pumps is that they actually embody, it's called coefficient of production, which is they're essentially, it's as if they were 200% efficient.
I want
They
to,
produce more power per,
There's a
Per
study
hour.
released this week. We could actually lower, we could lower,
Two things, yeah, I agree that, but basically it sounds like right now you're saying that the hardship is not created because of the economic condition.
ridiculous economic roller coaster.
But then how is
Crushing.
it then hardship?
That's not-
That's
it's not
kind of the
unique.
issue. So can you guys distinguish, because we need to make
Yeah,
a record here.
It's unique in that other people are able to do things like buff out the insulation on their house. And then they don't have a house that's structurally, you can do that, it's tied to the last one, in my mind.
So have you looked into insulating the interior of the house?
My dad's side of the house with the heat pump is completely insulated. It's a new build. We built it in 2019. There's nothing more that we can do to make that better. On the stone side of the house, we also had as much insulation as we could put in a stone row, so that is a limiting factor. In 2019, electricity prices were a lot lower, and I was under the impression that a heat pump was one of the most efficient ways you could go in power production. That turned out not to be the case, but I had to make a decision 6 years ago.
No, it is true.
it is the
not as
case.
efficient.
You put propane in there, you beat.
So what's, with the drill,
Yeah, that's the
geothermal?
geothermals first, and then heat pumps are very efficient,
Ground sources.
but
That
they still need electricity.
well, couldn't one argue that the alleged hardship is self-created because the Greaves, and again, all respect, decided to buy a house in a historic district that has a lot of restrictions on the exterior of the house, so that the actual purchase of a house like that comes with a lot of restrictions, and yet they purchased this type of house, which which is in a historical district on the National Register. And I feel number 4 is, I feel that the hardship has been self-created.
So can we go back to the top and as a group?
I'd like to say in regard to,
Majority or minority on each question, one by one?
can I say in regard to that, Karen, that her house, she is allowed, her house has historic solar panels on it that look terrible and are propped up and look way worse than the option, look way more garish and ridiculous than the option, just like putting them on poles. Like, she has options. There are things she can do, but it's going to look worse. Like, by anyone's, she could put them on the other side of the roof. And
The issue is not before you,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
appropriateness. It's
Yeah.
whether this is a unique hardship
But I'm
that's
saying,
affecting this property.
she's saying she bought a house that was historical, and so she should know that things are going to be limited. That house has historical, however ridiculous you want to consider, vestigial, whatever, pre-existing solar panels that are poorly designed and poorly functioning. Just like you're considering asphalt shingles to be historical, these are not buying a historical house is not, they're not buying the original house. There have been all kinds of alterations to this house throughout history up until the Historical Preservation Committee was founded, 5 years ago. And they care about, to me, it's incredibly species.
So was when
It dropped in the bucket in the course of actual history.
Plus, if you look at the letter of the law, in my opinion, it qualifies, because none of the materials affected are historic.
Yeah.
Nothing historic is going to be damaged or removed.
Or even obscure.
Again,
obscure.
that's, you're arguing the certificate of appropriateness, and that's, again,
Yeah.
this is a standard that
I'm
you guys are most familiar with. When
No,
it
I'm
applies to
arguing
use
the
variances.
creative part, because if I was buying this house, I would be looking at
Yeah,
the law.
if you're going with,
If I was
as pertains
buying it, I would
to-
be looking at the letter of the law and thinking about what I could do with it, and I would be convinced that I could put solar on that.
It's already there.
By reading the law, I was convinced that I could put solar on that house.
So without individuals remaining silent or opting out. Okay, just go one question at a time. The one that we're spending the most time on is the one that doesn't preclude the decision. Doesn't really, it's kind of like we're spinning wheels on the least relevant question.
Yeah.
So
So let's,
1, 2, and 3 as a group, yes or no?
so I would agree with it. And not necessarily, we're not taking a vote on
No,
motion,
just
there's no motion on the floor.
our opinion as a group of each question.
So the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible. For me, unfortunately, I'm on the no side of that. Or well, I guess, let me clarify, that there is a reasonable, return that's available regardless of where Orin said profitable comes in there, but I would have to say, I can't check that one off myself.
What is that return in your opinion? What is the other option?
There's
But it would
Yeah.
work.
This is solar
But
company.
you're not
No, okay,
getting
so
all of,
No, they won't put the panels on without the other side. I won't produce enough electricity, and I won't get my rebates, so it would cost $24,000 instead of $12,000. They won't put it on without the other side.
And that's where I'm caught up. I need to know, like, if professionals are saying this is the only way, the other
So,
way is so inefficient, we can't do it.
the
then
way you're working
what's
with
the other
the
option?
solar companies, if I'm not mistaken, is that they're covering all the costs of this.
time.
You're not putting anything up yourself. It's that they pay for they do everything, but they're getting a return on the panels. Is that how
No, I'm
No.
buying the panels.
you're buying completely
It's
straight up?
$24,000. You get $12,000 in NSERDA, and you get in tax credits. They have to meet a certain standard of percentage to qualify for those tax rebates. So even though they have given me a permit for half the panels, without the overproducing panels, I would not get any of the rebates. And they said I would not generate enough energy for the system to be worth putting on. So,
But you're putting up $24,000.
no, I would be taking a loan out for $24,000 until I get my tax credit. That's a Greenspan loan. Once I get my tax credit back, I would pay the Greenspan loan back $12,000, and then I would have an $85 a month payment for the remainder of the panels for 20 years.
Okay, so just to clarify for the board, what the hardship is it's an economic hardship pertaining to your energy costs. That's what is being planned because of the location of the panels. They won't allow it in a certain location. Is that accurately describing what?
Yes.
So really, you guys need to look at the picture with the energy costs. That's what the hardship, and that the only way to overcome that hardship is by having solar panels on this particular location.
Once you get a photo, Jen, in 1 minute.
So that's where I get stuck on your opinion of the matter, because it's like the professionals are saying, no, we're not professionals. And that the thing they're saying no to is putting it elsewhere. This whole conversation is about where she wants to put it and us not letting her put it there. That's where I kind of get back to, if you read the question again, there's a better option to reverse the hardship, what is it? What is the better option?
Well, if there's a $24,000 spend, right, to put the panels in, are there not alternative ways to do the house, like converting fireplaces to inserts or wood stoves?
It's not a $24,000 buy. For her, as a package, it's 12.
That's still the cost of perhaps 2 wood stoves. But I can't get a solar one. I'm going. But first of all,
It's just gotta do.
I
it's
get
just
it,
gotta
and
do
which,
fireworks,
but
it's
that's
just like
the
a
thing is,
butcher.
that's what's so frustrating about this whole thing, is that the fireplaces in the house are jamless fireplaces. They are arguably the most valuable thing in that whole street. But the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Board, they could say, oh, put inserts in your fireplace. They don't know what they're talking about. If I were to change those fireplaces, I would be changing the most historically valuable thing about that house. And that's the thing is, I know the house better than anybody else. Nobody else,
The
like,
simple numbers on using firewood for heat and the effort and the dirt and the dust from firewood. Nobody who has a firewood heating system would ever suggest that. It's like,
I have a wood stove and use it most of the
I heat my house with wood.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little.
Okay. I'm not saying that is the only solution. I've actually spent my money already refurbishing the fireplaces. I spent $15,000 on one and $26,000 on the other. So to put, and some of that is the reason I have no money right now, because I'm working to fix up the house historically appropriately. I wanted the fireplaces to look the way they were supposed to look, so I spent that money on that. And now, like, then I'm supposed to spend another $30,000.
Nobody's trying to make
I
it
know,
difficult, but
but-
this is a very high standard, and
I-
I've never seen it applied to something such as this,
I
where
understand.
generally it's applied because someone has a house that can't be utilized in the ways that are allowed under a zoning, so they have to, operate a certain type of business or something there that isn't allowed because otherwise,
Also, the electric fireplaces are not on the side of the house with the heat pump. It's a completely different section and they're not connected.
so it can be something, again, you guys can ask her questions as to why placing the solar panels in this particular location is the only way in which you can get a reasonable return on the house. Because that's basically the standard is, a reasonable return on the house. So that the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return.
So
question.
heard from Alex, but does anybody else want to chime in on number one? Or the
I think
regardless,
it's Matt.
or which way they're gonna go? You say it's Matt, that criteria is Matt. Okay. Alex,
I say no. I feel there's been other options that she's been given. Not as great.
Can you tell me what they are?
You have explained what they are and, in the backyard on the other roof, not as proficient as the ones, but I feel that you've been given other options.
But I can use the panels on the other roofs. And I can't afford to cut down all the trees. And I'm not allowed to put them in a ground mounted solar in the side yard, so I don't see what's workable. Because if I had another choice, I'd do it. I want to come here 5 times, no offense, you guys are wonderful. But like, I would have done whatever they told me to do to hide this. But like, why would I want to do this? I just am given no other choice. And I don't have another choice to lower my electricity bill. Like, I would have picked any other option. Like, I don't understand this. Do you?
Warren, where are you standing on number one?
You really gotta ask.
Yeah, you need to make your record.
Yeah. I think that this is the most elegant, morally, I think this is the most elegant option. This is the only real option for her that isn't that doesn't feel like the town dictating the way someone has to heat their home, which is a whole other issue. Like, for me, it's clear that this is the most, this is the best option and really the only reasonable one. The best one for this historic character of the house, most of all.
Let's just stay, again, like focused on reasonable return and the financial hardship that's alleged.
Everybody's.
I live in a 300-year-old house. My oil bill is $800 a month in the winter. I will be putting solar panels on it as soon as I can afford them. It's the idea that someone isn't allowed to use modern technology to be self-sufficient is
But
gross, and it's short-sighted, it's part of, no,
It is
part of, it's part of,
issue isn't
it's
whether
part
they
of,
can
it's part
put
of
the
taking.
installation, but the location is what created the alleged hardship.
Yes, because because of the professional, someone who does this every day, all day long, for years and years and years, said this is the only thing that works for her. So absolutely, based on the professional opinion in this, the only thing that'll work for her is putting the panels where we're talking about them going. And everything else is you know,
These things really need to be looked at as a single component once they've been figured out. You can't like piece it. But if you take this piece and put it on a different building, you just added 10 grand.
Oh, you mean on a reg?
yeah, we dealt with
Yeah.
that with the Crystal Hill house.
Yeah.
You know, you start moving things around, you start getting in cable, wiring, meters and circuits, and it turns into a nightmare.
I think what I was coming back to is the rules on the return. Like, that's what makes it hard. Like, this is not a good answer to anything.
But any of the other components of it would give no return.
I don't understand. Just explain that, yeah, that there's no return.
If you take that chunk of panels off the roof in question right now and just did the other ones and took another set, put them over here in the garage or something that don't perform as well, you've added a lot of cost and you're not going to get the amount of energy for the same amount of dollars. If you keep them together and put them in a place where the law says you can, I don't think,
I'm not
So-
understanding what you're saying.
that's the
Sorry.
least expensive and most productive.
Here's just it's not necessarily what's the least expensive, or it's whether there's an alleged hardship, whether that hardship exists, and whether this decision not allowing it at this specific location
Right.
basically is not allowing the applicant to have a reasonable return.
Right. What I'm saying is by removing that piece from that section in question, eliminates any possibility of any return.
That is correct. I can't put the system up.
That's right. I keep going. So, but just to clarify, because I think we're all trying to be something we're not. The actual solar company experts told her where the system will be the most efficient. The other options that we're discussing came from non-solar companies. The Historical Society saying, well, you can put it there, you can put it there, is not a solar installation company. So we're discussing other options of locations. That's not even the point here. The solar company said it needs to be there because that's the most efficient spot. Other people came out and said, well, you can't put it there, but you can put it on this roof and this roof. Did the solar company say that?
Can I ask you, energy expenses, paying them, is that a hardship? It's just like, no, it's, but what I'm saying as with a reasonable return. Under the statute and under is that, you know, I'm just a little, and I want to clarify for the record, because either way, this may, you know, potentially go to an Article 78 with regard to whether it's historically accurate. That's one thing, but what you guys are focusing on is the legal definitions here. You guys have dealt with it previously with use variances, what reasonable return for the property means. Is it, you know, it's what my concern as an attorney is basically that anytime, and I know I have a lot of energy issues and most people today, but that, and I live in the historic district, so I'm not allowed to put solar panels on the front of my house either, which faces that area. So I definitely 100% relate with you. But from a legal perspective, is that creating or denying her property a reasonable return in her ownership?
Yes. I just spent the last 40 years in the energy efficiency retrogrades and outfits. And kind
So
of
what would be a reasonable return on the property be?
anything over zero.
No, but right now, so right now she's not having a reasonable return on her property.
That's right. Right now it's negative.
And when she purchased the property, was she having a reasonable return on the property?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what the situation was there. But I know right now she's not realizing that any return.
When she bought it, electricity costs being 25% lower than they are now, or whatever it actually was. It's something in that neighborhood. Relative.
You're going back to that, I heard these. Not specific.
And I just want to get to the
She has a zone that's a critical zone for her father that he's living in. It's specific to her house that she is absolutely dependent on electric heat for that section, it appears. And the cost of keeping that section of her house up to a temperature that'll keep her dad alive, it has become such a burden that she's looking at making, spending all kinds of money that most people don't have. And so that to me is a particular hardship that applies to this particular house with this particular side unit that is all electric, given the course of the electrical costs in the last 6 years. Since time of purchase, or time of installation.
I'd be willing to bet that since the time of purchase, the return on that property is diminished. Whatever X you give it then and Y you give it now,
Yeah, and
it's less.
so it's not reasonable currently.
It's much
I would
less,
say not.
much less reasonable if you're at the mercy of inflation tech. Uh,
I think we've got our,
So just hang on, and before, so that you have consensuses on this, and then whoever's the consensus group can outline the basis for that, but did we get, Alex and Kara? I know you both has it now. Kara's in the Alex, just for. And then too, at that time, if you guys can continue.
still, we can have a thorough
You
discussion,
know,
still.
a discussion, and what I would say is there's a lot of submissions here. You guys, I don't know how thorough you've looked through all the submissions, the applicant themselves outline their position. Multiple submissions. It's definitely, thing that you're not obligated at this point, to make the decision, but if you do make a decision, we need to make sure that whatever decision is made, we can make it complete record, and that decision is articulated on record.
Let's have a discussion on number 10. Oh, it seems like you
This is still
a
on the-
connection of,
I mean,
maybe not.
I find it unique. It's unique, which is important. Yes, everyone has higher energy costs. Yes, inflation affects everybody. Yes, everyone's central and bills high. Yes, everyone pays the same number for propane.
Well,
But if we put a
Let me get
percent,
number two.
if we put a-
yeah, we're talking about number two.
if we put a percentage on it, 99% of the houses in Hurley could do something about it.
But is it unique to the district, is what it's saying, district or neighborhood? And the houses in the district or neighborhood?
And does that specifically relate to the historic preservation?
Well, it is a historic district, so.
But in my opinion of the way this came down the line, it's our historic district that it's coming down from. They need to receive a certificate of appropriateness because they lie within the historic district. So then now that this is being appealed to the planning board, we're looking at in terms of the
The
district.
historic district?
Yes. Which is basically how I'm interpreting.
If that's the approach, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it makes it hard.
Two separate heating systems, an unrented accessory apartment. No one else has that. It is a unique property.
So does anyone want to discuss the second criteria?
Redo the whole thing again.
The alleged hardship relating to the property is unique and does not apply to substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. As I said, I'm looking at it from how it's come down from the being played. We wouldn't even be here right now if we weren't in the historic district and seeking a certificate of appropriateness.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
We wouldn't be here right now. If your house wasn't in the historic district.
Correct.
You wouldn't even be here. So when I review this number two here, you were seeking the certificate of appropriateness from the planning board because your house is located in the historic district. And therefore, that is the reason we are here tonight, reviewing your appeal of the determination because you're placed in the historic district. So when I read that number two, the alleged hardship relating to the property is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood, taking into consideration the historical district.
Well, so you're being compared to your neighbors in the historic.
And if we go back to where I was talking about how, because they are using the policy, if you can't see the panels, if they're okay, then we are only a couple of houses in the historic district that can't put panels on it. And when you widen that out to the neighborhood, that percentage becomes even smaller.
But that's not what the question before us is.
It
It's not
says-
about.
no,
No,
it says-
but she's making an argument that pertains to that. So it's one of those things that we can have her flesh out by asking.
Half the district's houses have southern exposure. on the back.
Essentially,
The other half.
the southern section of the road, back side of the house, southern exposure, they probably wouldn't even think about putting anything on the north facing portion. So, touche.
So,
I walked around to all the houses.
so
and I
what's
counted.
the exposure, where you're looking to place it?
Or the
The
east,
only places that I could put it are on the south, which is the front of the house, which I did not put an application for, and the east.
Okay, so what's specific to here is, pertaining to the placement on the east.
Correct. Or we could put it on the front. I thought you guys, no one would like that, so I didn't even try
I would
that.
imagine that if they
100%
denied a
like that.
certificate of appropriateness for the east, that they would on the front facing Main Street.
I thought this was
I'm
nice.
guessing that would be the case. So,
We could go house by house. I've got them memorized. If you'd like to.
yeah, you guys can ask her.
I'm willing to bet if we look at an overlay of the historical district, you look at each house, their available aspects for sun absorption. Her house is the only one, or maybe one of two, that has the unique limitations based on large trees, based on orientation, based on frontage to the road. You know, it's we could like spend all day not believing her, but she's clearly done a lot of the research on it. Nobody else has actually gone, like, planning board didn't go and look at all the different houses before they did this. They just said,
Then you can kind of see it from the side.
Yeah, we're talking about something completely different from what the planning board, they decided.
and I'm saying anybody who had a chance to look at this before and come up with a factual, anybody who had a chance to look at this before and come up with a factual, data-based reason that there are multiple houses, there are, what's the wording in question? That there are multiple houses that have this problem in the district, and that if they give her the solar panels, and everybody will get solar panels, and it'll just be a big electric frickin' zoo, is not valid. This is like,
Again, that's not like.
So Matt, just to clarify, we are going on district, right? Because I know that was Josh.
Read it, and you guys decide how to interpret it. That's your job as a ZBA, you guys can interpret it. And the wording specifically is that it is unique to the district or neighborhood.
But we wouldn't be here
What would,
if it wasn't in the school district.
what would a legal definition of unique be? Defensible stretching of the word unique.
it needs to be a singular is one of them.
Merriam-Webster.
But it contradicts itself. It says unique and then it says does not apply to a significant portion of the neighborhood. Those are two different
So
things.
we're talking, the hardship is unique, and the hardship does not apply to a substantial portion of the neighborhood.
So one could argue that it's not unique, but then one could argue that because it doesn't impact every house in the historical district, that it's not substantial.
We got that a little bit in mind.
Yeah, no, you can argue and you can read it and interpret it as it is. Obviously you can see in different statutes and different parts, they use the word and as opposed to or, which is usually interpreted and is that it's both requirements or it can be one or the other. So again, but it's up to you as a ZBA, you guys have the power on appeals to interpret and then apply.
It's hard for me to expand this to the whole neighborhood.
But the street is so small.
But this is a legal question I'm trying to figure out, Katie.
I know, but the code says or neighborhood. So the street is so small that the neighborhood applies. If the historic district was much larger, then the neighborhood wouldn't necessarily apply. It's because the street is so tiny that you can have houses 5 houses away with solar panels. That is why it says or neighborhood, because otherwise you would be stuck in this stagnant thing. If the historic district couldn't take the neighborhood into consideration, the historic district could never change. And the historic district needs to change, because if Matt Chakowski wants to put heat pumps on the side of his house, he can't put heat pumps on the side of his house if you're only taking the historic district into consideration. You have to take the neighborhood in order for him to do that. So in that case, the neighborhood had to have been taken into consideration because there had to
Well,
have been.
I never asked for a hardship.
No.
Trust me.
No. But I'm just making the argument for neighborhood versus historic
I'm
district.
suffering much of a hardship.
If
right
you
now.
don't
Town
take-
Hurley, you need to pay me, you guys owe me money.
If you don't take the neighborhood into consideration, then there can be no change in the
I
history.
get it, and they need to consider, and to be honest, you need to stay and let them deliberate, and if they ask you questions, then you speak up, but so.
It's just really hard when I have answers for the questions, but
Well,
I can't
then
speak.
you can raise your hand and they can initiate it, but
Okay.
honestly, at this point, that's what the hearing's for, and this is for them to deliberate. Again, they can ask you, but you can't be,
And we've taken this very serious. Like, I know for me,
And
like,
I
I've spent
think-
countless
I
hours
know,
outside of the meetings
I know.
going through everything that we
It's just,
shared.
it's really hard when I've answered the question in my submissions and we're not talking about that, Like, I talked about how I answered all these questions, but we're not taking my answers. Like, we're not talking about them. It's like I knew.
Your answers are definitely kicking around in the back.
No,
Yeah, they're in all of our heads. We've reviewed all the data.
But we have to say that.
Amongst
and I'll
ourselves.
tell you, just, and I spoke with you beforehand, this is a very high threshold for showing that a hardship on a property.
But that's-
It's not just saying that, you know, because okay, I'm having problems paying my bills and
No,
that
but I
equates to
feel like
a hardship
answered
under these standards, yeah.
all of them.
And that's why they're deliberating and there are,
You have, but
different opinions.
just because you've answered the questions though, doesn't, okay, just because we've reviewed all of your submissions, we reviewed them thoroughly, and all the other submissions that have come in as well. But just because you answered the questions doesn't mean that they are
Yeah.
rock solid. We are here to deliberate them, and
What
we can
about
say,
inverse condemnation and the value of the
So,
house?
so first of all, they have their question before them, okay? And they need to look through that criteria. Me as attorney, my concern is making sure that, one, they're following the law, and two, that we're making a record that is complete, so that whatever decision they make, either in your favor or not in your favor, it is defensible to the best of the town's ability.
And I just want to say that of all my experiences in the town, regardless of what you decide, I will feel I've gotten a fair hearing. 100%. I'm not going to go around and complain that you guys didn't give me a fair hearing. I appreciate you considering this. I said that to Josh earlier on. That's not the experience I'm having. I care very deeply about this. And
And I think everyone here is supportive of
This is the
of
worst
green
case.
energy. There,
This
it's
is the
not,
worst case.
but their question isn't whether we support green energy. It has to do with a standard.
also though, I shouldn't be having to meet this standard because I never got the planning board experience. The planning board,
Well, that's a different.
yeah,
appeal.
but the planning board said, we do not have the legal authority to change the law. Only the zoning board could do that. And then I am
The
stuck.
zoning board doesn't have the legal authority to change the law. The zoning board interprets the law. And in this particular matter, the zoning board is empowered to look at this specific standard that's laid out in chapter 109. And the specific standard is based on what's called a legal
They
hardship.
didn't give me a public hearing. They didn't give me, they
And
just.
again, those are procedural issues that can be appealed in
I
other.
I
fashions.
missed the step where I got to make my real argument and then got shunted right to hardship.
Okay, so we're,
And hardship.
yeah, and unfortunately, that's not before this board.
so I'm gonna go ahead and read number 3, which I think is probably easy one for all of us. The request, if approved, would still conform with designation of landmarks as described in 109-5 of this chapter.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying that's that. However, there are, out of the 4, the 4 is the hardship one, which we may or may not let influence our individual decisions. We have to kind of check off all of them. There's 1 and 2 I'm kind of borderline on. Well, number 1 specifically, I can't necessarily check off of this one for myself. 2, I've kind of heard some arguments here that could lead me one way or the other. I don't know that I may need to think about this more. 3, I have no problem checking off, but it's that criteria is met.
Yeah, that's it.
Is everyone at least
Agreement on number 3.
Right.
Do you guys want to go back to discussing 1 or 2? Do you want to potentially,
It
reserve?
sounds like some of our board members probably have their minds set. I don't know if there's.
I have a question on number
persuasion.
2. It says, does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. I mean, just the fact that this house is in a historic neighborhood with rules and regulations, doesn't that sort of make this number 2, question sort of move, like an automatic no because of the district? Am I
These
not,
are specifically for the historic district, if you need the hardship.
excuse me?
I believe these are specifically written into
Yeah, this is part of,
the
Okay,
approval of this particular program for the
Okay.
historic district.
so again, applying, is the alleged hardship relating to the property unique? And does the alleged hardship relating to the property not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood?
So I think that, and that's where I'm hung up. So the
It's the
substantial
district
part.
versus neighbor.
Right, so like, if you think about it, the fact that the historic district is actually small in scale, right? So let's take that small, neighborhood that is the historic district. In order to use the nomenclature substantial, I would have to say that, would we agree that the inability to apply solar would have to be to over 50% of the homes in the historic district? But we can't say that, right? Because everyone on one side of the street can have solar panels in the historic district. And some people, even on that side of the street, can have solar panels. In the historic district, but a few can't. So how do you say?
Hardship is not, the hardship is that there is,
That you state.
economic, basically it's economic based is what the hardship, it's not, there's no, I guess, statement that there's like one that solar panels or non-solar panels are even allowed, and two that in and of itself is the hardship. The hardship is due to the energy costs.
So we would almost have to think of it as
So,
the alleged economic hardship.
and which
related
is
to the
being
property.
created in this circumstance because specific location is not being allowed solar panels. So is a alleged economic hardship to potential, is that unique to this property as opposed to other properties? And would it apply to a substantial portion of the neighborhood? Hopefully I kind of clarified things.
Yeah, it doesn't make it any easier to quantify, because now we're pretending to understand the economic
And
situation.
so that's where I go back to on number two, I've heard viable arguments that could have me, it basically has me kind of like in the middle, and I could go either way. I don't think that I could move on number one though. And check that one off. That's just me personally. We don't want to make this decision tonight. We want to wait and really go over everything. I'll go back and I'll look at it from every single.
So number one,
way.
you're locked on what?
I'm pretty much locked on that a reasonable return can be provided regardless whether or not.
And the other thing that I would say is if you do table a decision that you, and it's not something that necessarily submit to the entire board via email, because that would potentially be creating forms. You can submit to either the secretary or me or CC me and both whatever written things that you have and bring them to the next meeting so that it can be incorporated into potential resolutions as well as discussed from, a written list or an email at the next, that's if you table. That's what I would recommend. Obviously, you don't have to do that. So that can maybe clarify as you've had time to digest the different criteria and your arguments for or against, the meeting with those criteria.
I'm feeling that if we even tried to make decisions tonight, we'd be hung.
I would like to hear,
Hung as in there would be a form decision.
I would like to hear your arguments for and against one.
For number one,
Yeah,
Well-
Right?
No, so you're saying there's alternatives. I think he wants to know what do you feel?
my feeling
in
is
terms
that
of
there's
number one?
alternatives, and no offense, Gabe, but like,
Please tell me what those
hearing that.
alternatives are.
So if you're saying from right out, you're gonna be $12,000 invested
In a loan.
in a loan.
That's $85 a month, which
Yeah.
is 1/5 the cost of my electricity bill.
So I am in an old house myself, not nearly as old as your house.
What would you
And
want me to spend that $12,000 on to get the same?
I think
this is
gonna be.
Yeah.
No,
So this is what I think that there's just other options. I can't give you that answer right off the top of my head, but I mean, you already have an oil burner inside the house. I know it's right underneath your gas, and he's complained how
It's
he's
propane.
said it.
We switched to propane because it was cheaper at the time.
Okay,
But
So
we're
is
just gonna
there
go down
not
this loop.
other options for $12,000 of heating
That
costs
would
and stuff?
save
That's
me
just where I'm at.
$300 a month? What would that be? The only thing that I could think of is geothermal. I'd have to dig up the side yard and completely change all of the
You have to
the
get
the intake.
archaeological
I would, but also, no, but all of the utilities inside would have to be changed for that, so that's cost prohibitive. I mean, this is very clearly the most cost-effective way to save $300 a month in utilities. There's no other choices out there that's better than this.
I
Also-
don't know that it's that we're not making the argument that it's the very most perfect, cost-effective manner
Also-
out here. Like, it's
Also,
not-
the cost of my private residence, so that code can be interpreted completely different. That code could be interpreted to say the value of my home is lessening.
Could be interpreted in
Right,
different
and,
ways, yeah. But
and
that's-
so I answered it
the
every way
individual-
possible. But my house could be, you don't think that as we move forward and oil and gas and those things become more expensive and being eliminated, that my house will not go to zero value if I can't put solar on it? Like,
I
I
don't
had,
know, because I can't foresee the
I
future,
know.
and just the way that you thought electric heat pumps was the very best,
That
most
is
viable,
true.
perfectly,
touche,
option to go with. Now
touche.
here we are, years later,
But I did get-
discussing that it's not.
But I
the
did get a
most-
professional, a real estate agent, do an assessment of the house, and in her opinion,
I don't know if the whole world's gonna catch on fire and we're all gonna have to go back to burning logs, and I can't rub a crystal ball and make that decision
But
right now,
I did
saying
have,
this is the best media,
A real-
this is the media option.
2028 when that erupts and,
I did have a
Meteor,
real
super
estate
volcano,
agent say that
everything's
my house is
all right, so
actually.
it doesn't seem like things are really going anywhere. Does anyone have an opinion as to whether you guys should go through and vote tonight or whether to table it, till the next month, that decision?
I want this to go the right way.
All right, so do you think that it's best to table it, or do you think it's best to make a decision tonight? Alex, make a decision tonight, or?
I share Josh's opinion, the fact that at least we can all be justified in not kicking the can further down the road, not making a vote, but I feel like the vote might bring us back to the same place anyway, so either way, at least we could say we voted, but it's probably gonna be split.
Do you have an opinion? Just because
I
we
think,
should move on, we have other.
I think we should vote because this is insane at this point, and we're talking in circles around.
I think we should vote tonight.
Raised questions.
All right, well, it looks like we already have a majority, so let's go through them.
So we have our talking points about where everybody stands on the individual criteria, correct?
Yes,
Um,
and then once we go through a vote on each of the criteria, the majority who said it will then, for the record, make their explanation as to why either yes or no with that particular criteria. So let's go through criteria 1. The applicant cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible. So let's start with Liston. What is yes or no?
Wait a minute. What do I have?
Do you agree
You
that
have-
the?
you have to agree with your number one.
Disagree that the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible?
No, the project, yes.
Okay, so you agree. Alex?
You read the last second part, you got reasonable return.
The applicant
Cannot realize a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible.
It's so much different wording of the questions.
Sure is.
We're making a gut call here. We're not.
You should not be making a gut call.
No.
All right, Orin?
I don't think there's any other way for her to realize a reasonable return other than establishing her energy independence.
All right, so it's a yes. Karen?
No,
Kara?
no,
Josh? All right, criteria number 2.
The alleged hardship relating to the property is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. That is where I myself have heard arguments here that kind of swayed where I was coming in. I could go either way, but if I have, I'm pressed to make a decision here tonight, I don't have to say now on that one as well. But with further review, I could be swayed. I'm gonna go back, Tara,
No,
and Karen,
no,
Orin.
The retrofitted post office aspect, as well as the particular orientation and the respect for nature, makes this a unique.
Alex.
Yes.
Yes,
All right, third criteria, I believe you guys already went through that, everybody.
The request, if approved, would still conform with the designation of landmarks as described in 109-5 of this chapter. And we unanimously decided that that's yes.
yeah.
All right, and then the last criteria, the alleged hardship has not been self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the zoning board of appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of relief.
That again for me is where everyone, was it self-created? He comes in, did you anticipate what was coming down the line? No, you did not. Did anybody anticipate that?
This heat pump thing is making me nuts. It was not a mistake. If you put dollars in the BTUs out of any device, an air source heat pump is gonna be best bet
If you
to
pour
get.
gasoline in a wood stove, it don't go so hot so fast.
Temperature.
You know,
No, he's correct. You call an HVAC person here right now, they'll tell you that it's still the most
I
efficient
just
choice for a
pour
home.
it over.
So that's irrelevant. But they still need electricity. Electricity is expensive. So where are you at, Josh?
Still kind of in the middle, but I'll go with yes, but I still can't move on number one. So I can't, without checking them all off, I just can't.
is there a hypothetical situation in a perfect world where someone can answer that question number one?
One, not realize a reasonable return.
Tell me
Well,
someone,
what is a reasonable return on your home as a homeowner?
subjective? Completely, we could argue this for days and days. For days and days, we could argue. I want to know from the people who are saying no on this, what case, we could go, maybe it's on the computer, it's probably pretty hard to Google, but what case would make question one answerable and inarguably answer? Because the way it's worded, there's no way to unequivocally answer that question.
The part of that
It's a total trap
the
question.
part that moved me
It
to
makes
know is-
everything a subjective
is
decision.
is the part after that.
Yeah.
The part after
There's
that is
virtually no other option.
Well, let's read it, but
But then that's where it's like,
Regardless
you're
of
asking,
whether
what are the
that
odds?
return
Well,
represents the
with
most
sitting here right here tonight, I can't.
so are there
It's
other
not
options,
every-
even if they're not the best?
Yeah.
It's tough for me.
Is it someone who's allergic to copper and you're not allowed to have, no, I'm saying, the way this discussion is worth, what is a situation where you would be able to say, yes, there's no, this applies to this test. I don't think that question comfortably applies to any possible,
I would
it's
have
only the
somebody
most
else
absolutely
to make that
outlandish things that
actual
would make it so a
decision.
house, you could not realize a
No, the
reasonable.
hardship standard,
I
it's
know.
not just that,
I know, but do you have a
difficult
case?
or economic.
Do you have a case?
Well, if you want, I can provide, if that's something that will help clarify, I can get.
I
case law
would
and
love
you
to see,
guys can-
I would love to see an existing case where someone satisfied question one and what the circumstances of that are. It's gotta be something completely outlandish for it to be an unequivocal.
That's fair. That's what we'll do.
Yeah, no, if you want to.
You guys really think it's happening? What is it? Use your imagination. What's it gonna be?
Put a factory next to a house and the house loses all of value.
Well, oftentimes when you see it as relates to historic preservation, it has to do with the demolition of places that basically they can't repair the structure. And basically structure can't be used, it's unsafe, and there's a decision to basically
Put a steel
deny
plate
them
down.
the demolition. So then they prove that, hey, there's no way that this can be preserved, reasonably or whatever the thing, and basically that's what I've seen in case law when it pertains to hardships and historic preservation certificates of appropriateness.
So would the difference between keeping your house and losing your house be considered a reasonable return?
Well, my question is, and I guess, yeah, if she's not able to utilize her house because of the placement there, then I would say then that would be definitive, showing that there's no reasonable return on the house if she were unable to use the house and live in the house without having the placement of those who are thinking that seems to me to be definitive. But again, it's up to you to interpret.
Yeah, does that incorporate her being forced to sell the house because she can't keep up with the costs?
Sounds
I
like to
don't
me
know.
that there's more, possibly more debate to be had.
Yeah.
And second, I'm almost at the point where even if we vote, I'm going to abstain from
So does
voting
anyone have a
because-
motion at this point?
So make a motion to.
How do we have the conversation?
Well, we had to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, it's creating
It's
a more,
conversation.
more thorough record, and you guys should also, as I said, before you come back, after you've had time to process this, and you're requesting me to send some case law pertaining to our.
No,
You said everything was in bed, so-
pretty satisfied. Pretty satisfied, yeah. We know this.
How about I say this? If this continues on the way, I can't keep the house. I have a $500 bill I can't pay current. I'm going to go into debt and I'm going to have to lose the house. I might not be able to afford it next winter at all. So that is where we're at. I don't know how to make it any more dire or clear to you. Like, this is, I can't afford my bills. I can show you my checking account balance and I can bring in my bills. Like, I believe it. But if that's the definitive hardship, then we've just met it.
Yeah, don't be scared of some really obtuse wording in a totally shitty question.
So if we're not voting or table it, then you can provide case law of all four questions.
On
Yes.
your request, I'll see what I
Situations
have
where they're-
pertaining to hardships. And particularly, looking at the cases pertaining when it, pertains to historic preservation, which there's not very many, because generally hardships are more, it's more with use variances than, but there are.
You could vote. You would abstain. I mean, that,
Yeah,
We voted right now?
if the board wants to push the vote this evening, I'll vote.
You're abstaining.
No,
I threatened to abstain.
Is that your chairman, chairman?
Yes, it was my thing.
It sounds like you want to see some more case law to unpack this. And that's a valid question, but then we have.
Sounds like Warren wants us to see.
I mean, I was no on question,
I would, since it's been brought up,
but I was.
I think somebody needs to take that step and make a motion one way or another, either to table or to.
my motion, I would like to make a motion to table this discussion till our next meeting, which is within the 62 days of us having to make a decision on any given matter once the public hearing is held. Is there any second on that motion on the floor? Tristan. Going a second time for a second. The motion is seconded by Kara. There's a motion on the floor. Table the vote till next April, whatever the date would be needed. Any discussion on the motion on the floor?
April 10th.
When Matt has the case law, so maybe if we're gonna table it, we might as well get as much stuff as we can to make the correct decision.
I am
Is
curious
that
now.
something, is that something we have to go through in the meeting? Is there a way?
No, I definitely would want to send you case law well in advance of the meeting, because there's already a very full record. And I would advise you guys, if you are tabling it, to re-review the record, the submissions of the applicants, anything else that is relevant now that you guys have really in-depth looked at the criteria again. And review any case law, so that might help clarify the legal standard.
Do we want to focus Matt efforts on
Case law
specific
might sway
questions?
me on
Like, we
every
don't
one.
need-
I don't know. We'll
Like,
see.
we don't need Matt burning labor on the
Yeah.
question we all said yes to. We don't need him burning labor.
Oh,
Can we limit it down to like, what's the one that we actually want to hear some examples of?
So
Question
it
one,
sounds like number one.
number one, And is that it?
Number one's the number one.
Over there,
I was,
over there, others.
I'll see what I will focus on case law pertaining to number one and see what other case law, for two will work, but not really.
Skip 3. Sorry.
so I will remind you that there is a motion on the floor with a second to table the discussion until the April 10th, was it? April 10th meeting. The discussion has been held. All members in favor of tabling vote on this appeal for the next meeting, verbal aye or show of hands. I've got 2 in favor. Is that?
So, yeah, why don't you say we're going forward? Karen,
No.
Oh,
what was that?
Yes.
Warren,
Hey,
Alex,
yes.
listen,
Abstain. So we have quorum of 4 votes to table, 1 abstain and 1 nay. Warren is the nay and Liston abstains. The board members are in favor. Okay. Motion carried.
Next month.
Next
Thank you
month,
guys very
we'll
much
see you
for
again.
taking the time to get. I
I'm gonna rearrange the agenda so we can put the new business first.
I need to piece out this one.
Oh, you have to refuse yourself. And if anybody needs to use the bathroom at the time.
Is there anywhere to go?
You can hang out there. It's almost- Mike. Mike, Kara's recusing herself from this next one. Can she sit in there with the door closed?
We're already in there.
See afterwards.
Yeah. So there's the deck.
Oh, so it's like the application, they just can't.
Don't pass 10. You live for your mouth.
Yeah.
My daughter used to sleepwalk after we got a.
We used to make our daughter sleepwalk. And then she goes to bed.
Really?
Yeah,
You sleepwalk on
my
these?
daughter did.
I mean, let us know if you do, but.
Ugh, Route 28 tonight.
If we'll see you, we want you. We gotta go on 28.
One of you think you're getting out of here. We've still got 2 more things.
Fall, listen. However it may fall. We're obviously putting thought into it. So.
I gave. People just, do things, it's been perfect, because you get sued. And, it seems to be an ongoing thing. What next? See, it doesn't, exactly, it doesn't, if he didn't come to that meeting, if he had.
Okay, so, everybody, attorney's talking, we're just, so we're gonna go ahead and bring you guys before. Certainly did not expect that to go as long.
That happens.
Thanks.
Completely understand.
Okay, so next, do you want to bring up, we have their application on the drive, correct? Did everybody have the chance to review the new application we had
Yes.
before us? It's a use variance for, dog kennel on
Yes.
Spillway.
Yes.
Okay, and we have, I believe, self-explanatory use variance. Use is not allowed for veterinary dog boarding, or there was another thing, Paul's determination. Can we go into Paul's determination, CEO determination? Yep, perfect. Everybody review this, aware of it? I'll just read it. Dear Chairman, vote, I received a building permit application 5 days ago for alterations to conduct a business at the above referenced address, namely a kennel. The applicant is Kristen Daly.
Christine Daly.
Christine Daly. The owner is Mark Daly, who has provided a notarized authorization letter allowing Christine to act as agent on her own behalf. The subject lot is 2.3 acres, and while the applicant did not provide a zoning district on any of the submitted documents, it appears to be the properties in the A 2.5 district. Per the table of use regulations, under business uses, veterinary offices, animal hospitals, and kennels are not permitted in the A 2.5 or any other residential districts. Please be advised that the application for a use variance has been submitted. Blame James Doherty. There remained unprocessed until it was given to me around a week ago. The application was submitted in response to a conversation with Miss Daly, and I had several weeks earlier and was not submitted till after the denial of the building permit application at that time. I had not received one. I received one on 2/20 and a few other documents on 2/24. Permit application was denied in writing today, as I have already had the ZBA application requesting use variance. I'm giving a copy of the submission to Steph. Respectfully, Paul. Okay. Are you aware for the criteria of a use variance? Use variance is a three-letter dirty word in zoning code language. You have to provide, heard a little bit of the spiel of what we're going through. There's a similar set of circumstances for the use variance. You may have heard some of those, although different, there's some that are similar. An applicant cannot realize a reasonable return as demonstrated with competent financial evidence. Number two, a hardship is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. Three, the requested variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And four, the hardship has not been self-created. Were those on your application?
Yes.
Okay, four. Okay, so you're aware of those. Can we go back to the application itself?
No.
It should be, I believe it's usually down towards the bottom. I know this form has changed a couple times there. It's probably right. Yeah. There would be. So there's all the criteria that I just read, and you do have answers to them. So essentially what we do this evening is we hear the application. You've submitted everything. It seems like you have all the necessary documents, everything. This would be when you present it to the board and just explain what your reasoning being before us is. And then we choose to either accept the application if you have everything submitted that you have, which you do. And at the next meeting, we would schedule for a public hearing where adjoining neighbors will all get notifications of what you're requesting. And that's their time to come to the public hearing and speak their piece or speak against you, whatever, they have to say. So at this time, if you want to address the board, just describe what you're requesting. Obviously it's in format of all the paperwork, but.
So currently I own Daily Obedience, which is a dog boarding and training business. We are currently located on Route 28 in Kingston. I rent the facility in which I'm using right now. The goal is to be able to move from where we are now to our property at 198 Spillway Road. That property currently has a separate building on it, which is a setup currently as a garage underneath and an apartment on top. It has its own mailing address as 200 Spillway Road, but it is grandfathered into our property. The reason that we are looking to move it onto our property is because we are a small business. It is owned. I'm the sole owner. My husband works for me. The way that we are set up right now, driving back and forth to have to take all of these dogs out several times a day, and especially at night, is creating issues with sleep and our schedule. We are looking to make the bottom part of the building a kennel. Now, as far as kennel goes, it would all be contained inside. So it would be indoor kennels. We currently have 9 kennels. So we can have up to 9 dogs on our property or where we are. And to, take them out and walk them, they're on leash to be taken out. We are then looking to make the upstairs my training facility where I work on basic obedience and behavior modification. Would also at that point, if we get the use variance, we would be looking to expand the building slightly and then also make some upgrades and improvements to the building. In keeping that we are in a residential neighborhood and it is already being used as a apartment on the second level of it, we would be keeping the aesthetic of the building matching the aesthetic of our house and the rest of the neighborhood. And as far as outdoor increased noise, we would be looking to at the best options to insulate where the dogs would be kept so that there is not an excessive amount of noise. Where we are now, there is a building underneath us, a company underneath us that does not disturb their day-to-day goings on. We currently have dogs, so there would not be, it's not too much of a difference between the noise and what would be going on the property with dogs outside of the building. My whole brain just went blank. I think that was almost everything my spiel that I had.
As it gets towards night.
Any trimming done outside, we'd be looking at fencing in a portion of the property, so no matter what the dogs would be contained. Any dogs outside would always be leashed. The only time dogs would be outside after hours is last call, 10 o'clock at night or so, go to the bathroom, back in the kennels downstairs.
Any members of the board have any?
Oh, I just have one more thing to say, sorry. So another point that I just wanted to bring up is that I know that in the laws that it says that we're not, kennels are not allowed, but I do just would like to bring up the point that the idea of what a kennel used to be compared to a lot of home boarding that is done now is really two different things. And again, with the previous thing, there's a lot of word semantics that could go on as far as, well, you're not boarding in your home, you're still having kennels, the dogs are still contained. However, we're coming to ask to use the property for more than just boarding, but we are also at least coming to ask to have a business on our property, whereas a lot of companies such as like a Rover or WAG are having these same types of businesses are going on in people's homes, but there is no need for somebody to come in front of the zoning board to get the approval to run that business out of their home.
Any questions from board members for that, please?
Jokes.
Lot going on in the face of it.
And dogs in your house, basically electric bills.
So you have.
So I'm trying to generate.
It would be like nine, what would your maximum capacity be in the kennel after you've done the improvements and,
We are hoping to move all 9 of our kennels over right now. 5 of our kennels are 3 by 5, and then 3 of our kennels are
so about 9.
Yeah,
Five by
every
So you would
nine.
have about
We're looking at maybe
9
adding one
dogs.
more to make it an even 10 in the space. I already measured it and it's close.
And how about the proximity of your neighbors?
the neighbor that is the closest. I don't know how.
There's 2. We have our neighbor right across the street because the building is kind of right on, it's only probably about 50 feet off the road where the driveway is. And then the adjoining neighbor, if you're facing to the left, I think is about 150 yards, something like that.
We'll get to hear from them maybe.
We've already spoken to
We've
all of our
spoken to a
neighbors
lot
to
of
let
them.
them know that this is.
That's the next step. Yeah, is that correct? The motion is for
We're just entertaining the application right now and deciding whether all their crossed all the T's, dotted the I's, and
And if
completed.
there's anything else you'd like from us, just let us know.
That's part of the process. I know that they had like a site map and everything of it and everything.
You mentioned soundproofing. What's
to look into it a little bit more. But
Maybe, like I've known otherwise, like, double insulation with offset studs.
Mhm.
So that's why you don't have vibration going through the wooden studs. Not necessarily have any windows downstairs, which would eliminate anything going through the windows.
But remember, the primary question before us is the use, right? Property. You know,
They have a really compelling and modern issue, which is like, you're not allowed to have a taxi business, but you could be an Uber driver, right? It's a new issue that we're dealing with in a decentralized, digital world where people can be freelance and, you know, lots of things, and avoid regulation and have unfair advantage over local businesses. And I think that's a board decision, you know, and I think that's something that's worth debating as a town, whether you want to let a big corporation do things against the rules or town residents bend the rule to make it fair.
There's always all kinds of a host of criteria and restrictions that can be placed, but I won't even get into that before after we were done with the public hearing.
We gotta
A
find
full
out
discussion.
if the neighbors hate the idea.
Yeah, I think
Might harder
that's.
to-
I had one neighbor already who said he would come and speak on our behalf,
It's-
which is good.
We're not giving you all the hits.
I mean, I
You
guess
seem to be
it's,
doing it the right way.
it's really about like unnecessary hardship, right? Is there an unnecessary
There's a
hardship?
lot of the questions that are the, you know, criteria are
Very
similar to what we
Yeah.
just sat and went over for almost 2 hours. Well, I think in regards to just accepting the application and schedule a public hearing, everything is in order. I don't see any reason to deny their request by any means.
I think we're
Any
good for a
discussion
motion.
on that?
I think we're good for a motion.
You want to?
Yeah, sure. Make a motion to, open, to accept the application, open public hearing.
Schedule.
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 And make it a type 2 secret action. And throw that in there. too.
And start a type 2 seeker action.
Do we have a second on that motion? Warren was slightly faster. I didn't even see it listed. Yeah. There's a motion on the floor to accept the application, schedule as type 2 seeker action and schedule for public hearing on April 10th.
I heard open public hearing and then.
Accept the application,
And declare
declare it type 2 seeker action.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Means there essentially is no environmental impact.
Okay.
And schedule for public hearing for our April 10th meeting. And we'll set a time of 7:05. It gives me enough time to remember to call everybody. 7:05. Okay, all in favor, all board members present in favor of the motion, verbalize show of hands. All board members present in favor and opposed, let the record show that Kara did recuse herself. I don't know if you already wrote that down. Okay, so what will happen is, as I stated, we'll be having a public hearing at our next meeting, April 10th. And at that time, you're abutting, I think it's 200 feet or 250 feet from your property line. All those neighbors will receive a letter stating what your intent is, and that we're having the public hearing. They can come speak their opinions. Once if there's no massive outcry or any reason to keep the public hearing going to another meeting, we'll probably close it. And then the board has up to 62 days to make its decision. A lot of times we make a decision that night unless there's some kind of big things or in disagreement, and then we might keep it going, but that's how it all unfolds.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the meeting, hope it doesn't go wrong the last one.
Yeah.
All right, so, next order of business is the fence variance. We're all well versed on that, right?
Yes.
All right, so there's two things. One is, you guys need to, review seeker. Actually, we should probably get Kara back in here.
Oh, yeah. Kara, you can come back now.
Determination,
Fall asleep.
as to, whether there will be a potential significant adverse impact by the proposed action. And then, after making that determination, you need to determine whether you are granting or denying the request for the 4-foot area variance, increasing the height of the fence at the fence. 756
We had the, in regards to the first thing, we had the short seeker assessment before.
Yeah. So have you guys
I believe that is on the drive as well.
reviewed the short, environmental assessment form? All right, and there's just a couple things. So part 1 is submitted by the applicant. Part 2 and 3 are something that we'll go through and basically complete reviewing each of the criteria. So the one thing that I just want to point out, and I would recommend modifying for the part 1, is the part 1 does include the portion that identifies any potential endangered species that are located in this area. In the part 1, question 15, they list the northern long-eared bat, but under the EF Mapper summary report, it also has listed the northern harrier and timber rattlesnake. Okay, so I will modify that question to include. It looks like it was supposed to, because they had the first 2 letters for northern harrier, no, and then ... So
Can
just.
you remind me again why we have to do this? If, just because the fence is over 4 feet?
Yeah, so if this was a strictly
Just a 6-foot
residential,
fence.
under our statute, for seeker area variances for, residential property would not require this, but because this is used as agricultural, commercial use, it's unlisted. It's not a definitive requiring seeker review, or one of these definitive not requiring seeker review. So it was listed, the applicant put it as unlisted for those reasons. It's not black and white under seeker. Okay. But if you guys go through this criteria and say, after reviewing the short form environmental assessment forms, there is no environmental impact, there's no need, then what the issue is called a negative declaration, and basically no need for any further environmental review. All right, so we can try to go through this quick. Under the part 2, okay, let's go through the criteria under part 2. So will the proposed actions create a material conflict with the adopted land use plan or zoning regulations? Your answers are either no or small impact may occur, or that a moderate and large impact may occur. So will it, granting a variance, increasing the height of 4 feet on the fence, create a material conflict with the land use planning or zoning regulations?
You're looking for 10-foot fence now?
So
Initially,
under
we
our-
requested
They
13,
were,
but
yeah.
we've been talking
So
about 10.
initially, yeah, so, they did agree based on previous conversations that you guys had saying, hey, this is really high. 10 was the minimum that they said could achieve the goal.
They had.
So they consented, so for the purposes of this evaluation, we're looking at now a 4-foot variance for a 10-foot fence.
No.
All right, does anyone else believe,
I've already checked it all off.
oh, you checked all this off?
I didn't physically check it all off, but looking through the whole thing. Preempted.
Okay. Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of the use of the land? No.
But now you got me thinking about that. Fine.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
Slightly was an option,
I
right?
think it would.
It's no or small impact or moderate and large impact.
Oh, so no and small is the same?
Yes, no or small.
Well, when you say impact, is that positive or negative?
So I'll say small.
Say it positively. No, I'm just a net.
All right. Is everyone in agreement? Just,
Yes.
we can move through these quick, but we need to make a record. Will the proposed or action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? What do you guys say? 4 feet to a fence?
No.
I'm pretty sure that that's on our still find it.
All right. Will the proposed action result in adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit,
No.
biking, or walkways?
No.
All right. Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonable, viable energy conservation opportunities?
No.
No more energy conversations.
All right. Will the proposed action impact existing public-private water supplies or public-private wastewater treatment utilities?
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historical, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources?
Nothing we know of.
No.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important? No, I already did that one. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, and fauna? And 4 feet to the fence?
No.
No.
All right. Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems?
No.
No.
Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health?
No.
All right, so is everyone in agreement that the answer to all of those questions would be no or small impact?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
All right. So basically, part 3 is only required if there were any answers that were moderate or large impact. So based on this, you
Number 3,
maybe a deterrent, yes, not required. If anyone wants to add any other commentary, you can put additional commentary in there. What does the board feel? Is there any other commentary required?
No additional.
I feel like there's
All right,
nothing
so
more
chairman
necessary.
vote. This was prepared by you, the board. Sign there, date it. And then let's go to, there's a prepared resolution. All right, resolution determining that the granting of a 4-foot area variance increasing the height of a fence at 1756 Hurley Mountain Road will not have a potential significant adverse impact on the environment. March 13th, 2025, this resolution is dated. Whereas Hurley Mountain Farm LLC has applied to the town of Hurley Zoning Board of Appeals for a 4-foot area variance for a 10-foot fence, which is hereafter referred to as a project involving property designated by SBL number 55.2-1-8 located at 1756 Hurley Mountain Road in the town of Hurley. Whereas the site is located in a 4 zoning district designated by the town of Hurley zoning code, whereas a public hearing was held on the application for the project at which the applicant and public were provided an opportunity to be heard. Whereas pursuant to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law of New York as amended and regulations of the Department of Environmental Conservation promulgated thereunder, collectively referred to as seeker, and the town of Hurley Zoning Board of Appeals, or the town of Hurley Zoning Board of Appeals is required to make a determination whether the action to be taken by the agency may have a significant impact on the environment prior to making a final determination on whether to grant the application. Whereas the ZBA has identified the project as an unlisted action pursuant to seeker, has declared itself lead agency, and has caused to be prepared a short form environmental assessment form for the project, including the preparation of parts 1, 2, and 3 of the short form, in short referred to as SEAF, as well as reviewing other information concerning the project and its potential impact. Whereas the ZBA has considered the potential impact of the environment that may be posed by the project by undertaking a thorough review and examination of the completed SEF forms, taking into consideration written and verbal comments submitted on at the application's public hearing and other supporting documentation and materials available concerning the project, including those on file with the ZBA. Whereas based on the information contained in the completed short SEAF and the other information summarized above and below herein, comprising the administrative record in this matter, the ZBA determines that the project will not result in a potential significant adverse impact as specified in the short form or short environmental assessment form, SEAF. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the ZBA has considered the project pursuant to the parameters and criteria set forth in seeker to identify the relevant areas of environmental concern with respect to the potential impacts on air, groundwater, or surface water, wetlands, land, historic, archaeological, and other recognized and or protected resources, threatened or endangered species, community character, potential cumulative impacts, if any, and other potential impacts as required under the applicable seeker regulations, and hereby approves, adopts, and incorporates the responses to the SEAF, including parts 1, 2, and 3 thereof, and based on a thorough and comprehensive review of the SEF parts 1, 2, and 3, comments made at the public hearing and other documents concerning the project, ZBA hereby finds that the project will not result in a potential adverse environmental impact requiring the preparation of an environmental impact statement. Be it further resolved that the ZBA finds that the project will not result in a potential significant adverse impact on the environment for the reasons set forth there in the SEAF, and thus the ZBA, having conducted this review pursuant to seeker, issues a negative declaration for the project pursuant to 6 NYCRR section 617.7. Be it further resolved that the town clerk is authorized to file this negative declaration in accordance with the applicable provisions of the law, and this resolution shall constitute a notice of negative declaration. The requirements of seeker having therefore been satisfied. Be it finally resolved that this resolution shall become effective immediately upon its adoption. All right, so let's take a vote on this resolution. Do I have a motion?
Do we have to go through considerations and?
That's what we went through. No, this is for seeker.
Oh,
This is just for seeker. This is the resolution for the, this is the resolution for the area variance. So we have to approve this first. Yeah. It's late for it.
I'm dying a small death one, so I was still decided.
All right, so do I have any motions pertaining or any, motion?
I motion to approve the resolution regarding seeker or short form negative seeker form application. Words.
I a third, whatever.
All right, so Scott, any further discussion?
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor, seconded by Alex?
What'd you say?
I made a motion to approve the resolution regarding the short form environmental assessment form. For seeker. Is that what it is?
Yes. Yes, a short.
And Alex second, third.
All right, all in favor?
Verbal aye or show of hands.
Any opposed?
All present in favor, none opposed.
All right, so this is passed.
Now we'll get discussion on the actual fence. I've been saying this from, I don't know, 6 months now, that, I don't think that adding 4 feet to the fence to allow for a 10-foot fence because of the nature of the property and what is transpiring there, you know, the height of the mulch piles, the height of the equipment, the fact that there are direct residential houses that butt the property, that increase in the fence height is not substantial. We've approved up to 8 in other similar circumstances when it's residential to something non-residential. So that's my thoughts on it. Any other thoughts that any board members have?
None of the neighbors came out,
We have not had a single person come.
against it. I'm thinking that, if this is going to, help those two neighbors, with their problems, they find that if the one feels that a 10-foot fence is going to solve his problems, I don't really see any reason not to grant the.
Signed up.
Do you have to read that?
No, I'm not gonna read it. Actually, there's a basic form that we always use with, let's just go through the balancing test and standards, required to the statute, which you guys are very familiar with. And report your findings. So.
Yeah, let's read considerations.
All right, with granting the requested, variance, produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties?
No.
And is that because the variance is being sought to accommodate neighbors who do not want to the agricultural operations conducted to detract from their view of the landscape in the neighborhood? And
Correct, because it's a border to a agricultural commercial.
Sheds and mulch piles, machinery higher than 10 feet.
Yes.
Okay.
all right, any other?
Right, because they wanted, that's maybe where they're going with 13, but 13 is just too. I don't know.
Any other comments on that?
Nope.
So does everyone agree that it would not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about the benefits sought by the applicant? Does it outweigh, or can it be achieved by some other feasible method other than an area variance?
No,
No.
Strongly.
after several months.
All right. Everyone in favor?
Yes.
Agreement. All right, and, let's
Will the
say,
requested variance be substantial? Nope. We're cutting them from 13 to 10. Achieve same goal. So I said.
Defenses make good neighbors.
So does everybody agree that the requested area variance is not substantial? We've already knocked them down.
Agreed.
He will propose variance have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. That kind of goes right in line with what we just reviewed before with the short form environmental assessment form. So everybody agrees that there will be no adverse effect on the neighborhood or district. E is the alleged difficulty self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the zoning board of appeals, does not necessarily preclude the granting area variance. No, it's not. Outside.
all right, let's see.
Is it the minimum necessary? Well, they were asking for 13, we cut it to 10, so we're determining that's the minimum that they will be.
So we cut them to 10?
We,
Or they came back?
there was discussion between us and them saying 13. They came in wiggling around and said, well, shoot for the stars, and we'll tell you, that's when they went with 13.
Okay.
But between our discussions with them and the one time we had discussions with them, I don't know, what was that, June or something like that? Yeah.
364 days.
So do we want to impose any conditions or restrictions?
What's
Is everyone in agreement there? Can't necessarily think of any other.
No,
You don't agree?
no, I don't want to pose any, I agree with Alex.
Conditions.
No conditions.
All right, so if we're, you guys are, granting it.
Well, I will make a motion that we approve the variance for 4 extra feet on the fence. Second by Al, so there's a motion on the floor, any discussion?
Nope.
There being none, All board members in favor, verbal aye or show of hands. All board members present. Did you read it in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. All board members present in favor, none opposed.
All right, and just, to clarify, or not to clarify, just, we have a second, motion to pass a resolution, codifying the decision of the board, resolving that based on the submissions, information, public hearing, that the variance is for the 4-foot variance, to build the fence at 10 feet is granted, that the variance shall run with the land and shall bind successors in interest to the applicant, and that the resolution shall be filed with the town clerk, within 5 days of its adoption and sent to the applicants, and that it shall become effective immediately upon its adoption.
I make a motion to exactly what he said.
All those things.
Yes. Second.
Seconded by Tara. Any discussion on the motion from floor? All board members in favor, verbal aye or show of hands. All board members present in favor, none opposed. Did everybody receive the minutes on the previous meeting or have a chance to review them?
We can call them minutes, we should start calling them hours.
Hours. I just, good lord.
Review the hours from the last meeting.
I did anybody make any changes on the drive?
The date is wrong on them. That was February, not January.
January 9th.
That's why I was having trouble finding it. I looked at it and I'm like, oh, this is January's.
Sarah, you usually catch those.
I know. The spelling, the grammar.
She caught the grammar.
So second page under item number 2, application of McDermott.
You want them to take their eyes?
Nope, I didn't necessarily want that. I just wanted to, after we closed, just say the board reviewed the criteria for an area variance.
Okay.
Because that's an important part of like our review.
Okay.
That should almost be like anytime we make a decision, we can throw in board reviewed the criteria for the area or the use or,
Okay.
whatever we're deciding. That's that. And then,
You want it like,
yep, I can literally give you this afterwards. You're just have to do it. correctly. And then chairman vote motion to approve with the condition that no further encroachment happen to the lot line. I made that, that criteria once we approved that. So that should just be included in that minutes. And then there was just literally the same thing after the second one. Board reviewed the criteria for the granting of the area variance. And then there was just a little change in wording under the John Brown here, where it said moving in from the code enforcement officer and decided to have the applicant withdraw the application. Period. Matthew Jankowski, town attorney, was going to speak with the code enforcement officer regarding the matter. Yeah, maybe we just reviewed that whole assessment, so forget it. So essentially on my edits were just that I added into when we made a decision that the board would use the criteria for granting an area variance. And then also that basically that restriction we put on the first one that there was no further encroachment. And you don't even know about that.
my husband told me,
Oh, okay.
and I didn't catch that. On page 2, Stephanie, did you change, Katie and Alex?
Oh, there's 2 X's.
Yeah, 1 X and then a T and Katie.
Oh.
Right before Alex.
Okay.
See that?
Yep.
Okay.
It was a little edit. So I just-
Okay.
Okay. At this point, I know what paper we want. So is there any further edits to the minutes? I will make a motion to approve the minutes as amended
I second
here
the
this
motion.
evening. There's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion?
No.
All board members in favor of approving the minutes from February, verbal aye or show of hands. All board members present in favor, none opposed. I just have one comment. do we even need to have public comment sections at the beginning of meetings? I never used to do it. Belinda wrote me a nasty gram telling me I had to. And then at one point, Victoria was like, you're the so, why are you having this public comment? If that's a public hearing. And if it's, you know,
Yeah.
confuses the matter. I'm all for it. If you say that I gotta do it,
No,
keep doing it. I don't think that I need it. I've
there's
been doing
nothing
it.
in our local law that requires. you
I
to
can
do
see the
that.
town board needing to have a public
Yeah,
comment.
no, no,
I can see the planning board.
It's up to you
Why do
guys
we have
whether
it?
you want to leave that in.
I virtually, since we've had, I've never had anybody talk at a public.
Well, they
comment
come
section.
here.
Now you better wait
They
until after
come,
the next
they come,
meeting
Yeah.
because
But
they're.
it will confuse them, because they think they're coming, they might come for a public hearing that evening, and then they have a public comment, and they're like, I'm here, they start talking, like, oh, this isn't the public hearing, I meant to talk at the public hearing. To me, it's confusing, and convoluting, I think it's completely unnecessary.
You guys determine how your agenda proceeds.
All right.
And
No more public hearing or comment at the beginning,
Absolutely Possible to take it away.
strike it from the agenda.
How is the community supposed to get a reasonable return on their comments if there's no comment period?
what is it?
Regional return on the comment.
Is there anything else that anybody would like to discuss this evening?
New York State Preservation League has no problem with solar panels on historical houses. In fact, they encourage it because of the sustainability issues.
Yeah, I don't think.
And then just to let everybody.
Do any other board members want an official town email address? Apparently they're up for grabs.
I do things.
I have a
I can't
separate
afford it
email.
right now. I don't have the extra.
It's too late for anybody.
I don't know how.
I knew that.
All right.
This thing.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Don't blame this part.
I don't know how.
Seconded by Karen.
Preservation.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting for you to keep up any conversation afterwards. All in favor, verbal aye or show of hands. Warren doesn't want to end it.
Why end it?
All board members in favor of adjourning the meeting.